This week's Parsha is Parsha Terumah, and begins a series of Parshios. You have Truma, Tetzaveh, Vayakel, Pekudei, that deal with, ostensibly, the building of God's home, building the Beis HaMikdash, which is the precursor of the Beis HaMikdash, is really the Mishkan. Mishkan comes from the word Shachen, the Shekhinah. That's the place where the Shekhinah is going to be housed. So, one of the questions that is raised by the commentaries, we know that there are Chamisha Chumshei Torah. There's 5 books of the Torah. Why do you need 5? Put it all together in one, right? It's not like, Art Scroll, you have to pay for each one separately. Here it costs the same whether it's in 5 or it's in 1, put them all together. So, each Sefer represents a different stage of the Jewish development. You have Bereshis focuses on the development of the individual, the avos, because they are the repository for the genetic DNA, the spiritual and genetic DNA of the Jews. So it's their development and their perfection of their character and their, that's the underpinnings of the nation, because we come from that, both physical and spiritual DNA. So that we understand that's the focus. And really, Shmos is the development of the nation. So, and then you have Vayikra, which focuses on the avoda, on the service. You have all the laws of the korbanot, and so you would think that if we're going to talk about building the Mishkan, that it would fit a lot more appropriately in Vayikra, Torah's Kohanim, the laws. That's where all of the avodah is taking place. It's taking place in the Mishkan, and the Kohanim, the begodim that they wore, and all that. Put it all there. Why are we putting that in the Sefer that's part and parcel of the development of the Jewish nation? Why that would think it should really be something that can be found over there. So that's one question perhaps we can circle back to and answer. There's a famous insight that, many of the commentaries say. I want to share with you an idea from my own Rosh Hashiva, Rabbi Yochanan Zweigschliter, should live and be well, that I think is just a whole different level of depth to this, to the point that's being made. So what happens here? It says, Vayidabra Hashem al Moshe Lemar. Hashem instructs Moshe saying, Dabel b'nei Yisrael, v'yikchu li truma. Yikchu li truma means that they have to take for me a portion, me'ez kol ish, from each and every person, asher yidvenu libo, whose heart motivates him, tikchu es trumasi, they have to take my truma. So the clause, vayikchu li truma, has bothered many of the commentaries, because actually what we're doing is we're making a donation. Right? We're making a donation. This money is going to be used to build the Mishkan and the vessels of the Mishkan. So the appropriate verb should not be vayikchu li truma. What should it be? V'yitnu. To give, not to, they're not taking it, they're giving it. So why does it say, so the standard answer to that question has always been, is that, when a Jew gives tzedakah, when a Jew does, you get more than you give. So it's an act of taking, it's not an act of giving. That's usually the standard answer that is, when you're donating, you're getting, you're not giving, right? That's the, if you take, courses in learning how to do appropriate development for institutions, the idea is that if the person has to understand that is becoming part of something. It's not, you're not giving. You're taking for yourself by giving. What you're doing for yourself, you're doing for your children. That's the way. So that's the idea. That's a standard answer. I want to today perhaps come with a different understanding. I think that opens up a whole new insight, and I think especially into our own lives and our own relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I believe it's Yerushalmi, but it's also brought down in the Medrash. It says an interesting thing. It's one of the garments that was worn by the Kohen Gadol is the Me'il. The Kohen wore a Me'il. It was a bluish-colored woolen garment, and at the bottom they had bells and pomegranates, right? And it says there, Uvo al HaKodesh, that's the pasuk, v'nishma kolam, that the sounds were heard, b'vam al HaKodesh, when he entered into the sanctuary. Like the bells would rustle, it would so a chime, would make a chime. So Rabbi Yochanan, the great Amora, is actually the redactor of Talmud Yerushalmi, the editor of Talmud Yerushalmi, Rabbi Yochanan, so the first generation of Amoraim, he says, the Gemara says that the message he took from the idea that when the Kohen would walk in, that the bells would chime, is that he never walked into a room without knocking on the door first. And it said, and even his own home. That even his own home, he would not enter his own home without knocking on the door first. Right? Beautiful message. Every one of the garments and every one of the vessels, each has a level of understanding that affects us personally. That's the understanding he took from it, right? Actually, every one of the garments also offer a certain atonement for different sins. The bells atone for the sin of Lashon Hara. It says the thing that makes noise should come and atone for the sin that makes noise. But okay, that's, and we've talked about in the past why Rosh Hashanah is talked about is described as something that makes noise. But I want to focus on this, the teaching and what's being derived here from Rabbi Yochanan, that you have an obligation to knock on a door before you enter into someone's home, he's saying even your own home, like your own home, it's my house, right? Knock on the door before you enter. Now let's see. That's the specific. The point that the Medrash is saying is he would not enter into his own home without knocking first because of what we see by the Kohen Gadol. Now, intuitively, we understand there's an idea, of privacy and modesty, and don't just walk into a room, even your own house. We understand that. But Rabbi Yochanan said he saw it from the pasuk here. But if that's true, you have to understand because it's not really the same. The Kohen Gadol is entering into whose home here? It's going into the Kodesh, going to Hashem's home. So therefore, I understand, you're going to somebody else's home, you knock before you go in, you announce yourself. How does Rabbi Yochanan learn from there that when you go into your own house, you should knock? I'm saying it's a good idea, knock on your own, but to say that because it says over here that the Kohen, that he, so then that's a proof that you should knock on your own home. They just want to understand the logic there. It doesn't seem to tie. The logic doesn't seem to be solid. So that's the question we need to focus on. The
wife is not sneezed, so the kids are naked.
Yeah, I'm saying those are good. Those are very good reasons to do it, but it's not because the Kohen does it. All right. The Talmud in Maseches Yevamos has a whole section that discusses the teary separation of Naomi with her two daughter-in-laws, Rus and Orpah. Right? We know that Naomi was going back from Moab. She was going back, traveling back. We read it on Shavuos. It's the reading of Shavuos. She was going back home, and her two sons had passed away, and their two daughter-in-laws were there, and they wanted to go with her, and Rus stuck with her, and Orpah left. From Orpah came Goliath. From Rus came David HaMelech. And the Talmud looks at it as that, there was a cataclysmic event that was the event that one Mashiach comes from, the other one, Goliath, so what was there? The Gemara says there was actually the process over there that they were going through was a conversion process. There is a rule, and we learned from all the laws of many of the laws of conversion, how you're supposed to convert people, what mitzvahs you're supposed to tell them. Right? The quintessential convert is Rus. Very often when a woman converts, they give her the name Rus, right? Because that's the. So we learn a lot of those laws of conversion are learned from that particular situation, because you're supposed to first push them away. We, unlike most other religions, right? We don't go out and try bring them in. That's not. You keep the Zion mitzvahs b'nei Noach. You're fine. You don't need to take on yourself the yoke of Torah, and we push them away. It's not. We're doing you a favor. It's a lot harder doing it our way than and unless the person really pushes. That's what happened over here. It was pushed, and among the things that the Psukim say, the dialogue between Naomi, the mother-in-law, and Ruth, the daughter-in-law, among the clauses of what she was telling her, Chazal derive that there were certain mitzvahs she was telling her. If you become Jewish, you have to keep this. That was the discussion that's going on there. It's cryptic because it's not explicit. However, what is fascinating is that there are only a certain amount of, there's kalos v'chamuros. You're supposed to have certain serious, very difficult undertakings, and then there's some appearance of certain lighter mitzvahs that you have to know, that you have to accept, and these are things, but if you look, it's interesting that the Torah decides to take these as the mitzvahs, so obviously they represent something that shows a great chasm between what it means to be a Gentile, and now accept this mitzvah, and become a Jew. One of the mitzvahs that she mentions, where you're going to sleep, I'm going to be with you, I don't mind, in your house that you'll be in. We learn out that you teach the laws of mezuzah. You know that a Jew has to put a mezuzah on their door. Are you aware of that? Where you sleep, I'll sleep. You put a mezuzah, I'm going to put a mezuzah. I'm accepting myself mezuzah. So it's interesting. And if you would choose mitzvahs, you say, okay, it's very important to tell the Gentile that this is a mitzvah that you have to be careful with. I'm not sure that, mezuzah would make the top 10. I've said that there's that funny story. I don't know if you've ever told me. I think I said it over in the class about, there's this non-Jewish neighbor living next to the Jewish fellow, and he sees this Jewish fellow, he's got great family, great home, everything's going well, doing well in business, So he comes to me and says, what's the secret to your success of running such a successful home? So he points to mezuzah. He says, the mezuzah, this is what does it for me. So the Gentile says, can I get one? I want a mezuzah. I want a mezuzah too. Rambam says a guy can keep any mitzvah except for study of Torah and Shabbos. So the Jew says, what? I'll pick one up at the store for you. I can give you a mezuzah. No problem. So the Gentile takes the mezuzah, puts the mezuzah on his own doorpost, his own house. 3 weeks later, he comes back with the mezuzah. He says to the Jew, no, it's not working for me. I got to give this back to you. So he says, what's wrong? He says, from the time I put it up, every night the line of rabbis come knocking on my door, they wanting donations, right.
Going out of business.
Right, and it's easier for you to take a bath. But so you would think, what's the idea that mezuzah is the mitzvah that you tell a Gentile? That's why is that considered so significant? So I think there is a profound message here that we have to look at even our own marriages and our homes differently in terms of what the Torah expects from us. The Gemara says in Sota that what a Jewish marriage is, it's not even a partnership. People in the Gentile world, at the very best, it's a partnership. Partnerships, could be each one retains their own identity, but you join together and you work together. You can have your bank account, I have my bank account, we decide how we split the profits. That's what a partnership is. That's in the Gentile world, the non-Jewish world, and even in the secular Jewish world. We become partners. You get your ring, I get my ring. That's, according to the Torah, that's not what marriage is. According to Torah, a man and a woman become basar echad. They become one flesh. It's a fusion. It's a fusion. Adam HaRishon was created initially both male and female. Very interesting. Almost like a hermaphrodite, meaning it was one entity, both being male and female, and then God separated. And the Medrash says, and that God took away the portion from the man, and now the man's job is to go back and get it back. Find the part that was lost. Go look for his Aveda. But it says, and when a man gets married to a woman, it's a fusion. Right? She becomes, the man and woman become like a one new entity. Like my story, my Rosh Yeshiva in Eretz Yisrael, Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. He would go with his wife to the doctor. She was having problems with her foot. And he would tell the doctor, our foot hurts. Our foot hurts. Where the man ends, the woman begins. It's one entity. That's the. And what is the glue that creates this fusion? What is the glue that creates this fusion? When it says in Sota, it's Hashem. Because Hashem is also part of that fusion. He also becomes part of it. The Gemara says an unbelievable thing. The Gemara says that Ish ve'Isha, right? They have shared, an Ish and Isha, man and woman share two letters, Aleph, Shin. Right? It says if the Shechina is Beinehem, right? Then you have the Shechina is the Yud from the Ish and the Hey from the Isha. So the Ish and Isha, they have the Shechina, then there'll be a home of blessing. But if you remove the Yud and the K, you take out the Yud and from the man and the Hey, means God is not between them, then what's left?
Esh.
Esh. It's a consuming fire. It'll be a destructive home. So we have the Jewish home requires the fusion of the man and the woman. Right? I've actually heard it, my Rosh Yeshiva said it somewhat in the same idea. We find that by the Gemara in Sota there says that to get a zivug, to partner up, we're going to be using the partner, but to find that zivug, the one that's going to be the mate, that you confuse with, that you become one with, it says that it's as difficult as Kriyat Yam Suf. It's as difficult as the partition of the Red Sea. So it's difficult to understand. You are using the expression or the metaphor you're comparing it to is something which splits, is separation, and yet you're talking about the ultimate unifying act, getting married, and why are you comparing it to something that is a separation? Right? You can ask the same thing like, by a bris, right? A covenant, to make a covenant, we use the expression to be kores bris. Kores means to cut. It's really like to separate, and yet it's something that represents bonding. Same idea. So my Rosh Yeshiva said, that's a very important point. He says, why is it fine? You find very often that the older a person is, the more difficult it is to get married. The older, because what happens is as we get older, we become more independent. and we don't feel we need anybody. So to take two people that are now, they're in their late 30s and bring them together, it's very hard because each one is independent now. I don't need you, you don't need me. Now bring them together, and they should feel like they need each other. It's very hard. For marriage to be successful, it has to be that I'm the recognition I can't exist without you, you can't exist without me. So it's not 1 + 1 = 2. It has to be that a half plus a half equals 1. So for marriage to be successful, you have to realize I need you for my reality. I need you to be, that's part of my essence. That's why it's two halves. That's why the comparison to the Yam Suf. It's splitting. It's the only way you can get to the recognition that it's split. We're split entities that need each other to come to one. If we see each other as not split, but each one is a complete entity, it's very hard to get a successful. You're not going to get the successful marriage there, right? So you need the two halves that become one. The point we're saying is it's not really it's a half and a half equals 1. There's the other glue component over there. Is you need the Torah, you need HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's the glue, the spirituality that brings them together, that makes it into that one unit. That's what has to happen. With that in mind, that there is this fusion, right? So then you wouldn't say it's my house. My house is in my name. It's not my wife's. It's mine, right? I don't know, for tax purposes you might want to do that, but in terms of understanding the house we live in, whose house is it? It's ours. It's our. You would say it's our house. It's our home. It's our home. Yeah. So here we have a fascinating insight. Let's go back to, so we had a couple of questions. Number one, we asked, why is this so important as part of the formation of the people? This should have been in Vayikra when you talk about the actual service itself, building the Mishkan should have been there. That was the first question we answered. Then we asked, the other question is, why say Vayikhuli? It's a taking, should be in a giving. And we asked also by the mezuzah, why is it so important to tell a non-Jew what mezuzah is? Right? And one additional point that I haven't made yet about mezuzah, and I want to make that because it's going to help over here understanding too. There's also a question I heard from my Shiva, it's like a beautiful question, is that mezuzah is different than all other mitzvahs. When you talk about the mitzvah of tefillin, the name of it is tefillin. Right? The name of the mitzvah. When you talk about lulav, the name of the mitzvah is lulav. Mezuzah is the only mitzvah you talk about. Mezuzah means, what does mezuzah mean? Chsaftem al mezuzos beisecha. It's doorpost. Why are you calling it? It'd be like calling tefillin arm. We don't call tefillin arm. It's not called. It's mitzvah. You put the tefillin on the arm. Why is it called? Why is it mezuzah? Come up with a name for the parchment, that scroll. Come up with a name for it, and then that's the name. It's not called by the doorpost. So why are we calling this? That's the name of mezuzah. It's a strange way to refer to a mitzvah. As I said, it'd be like calling tefillin arm. We don't call it tefillin arm. We call it a tefillin, right? So the pshat is like this. In the secular world, I think there's actually Rex is Lex. I don't know. There's an expression that your home is like that's your kingdom. That's you have a sense. The government shouldn't be telling me what to do behind my closed doors. My home, my domicile, that's mine. Don't tell me what to do, right?
Basic human right.
What's that?
Your basic human right.
That's it. That's my doorpost, past my doorpost. No one has a right to impose their will upon me. We find in halacha it's not like that. There's halachas for the bathroom. There's halachas for the bedroom. There's halachas for the kitchen. Every aspect of the home
Cutting your nails.
has halacha. There's halachas in it. Why is that? Is because what we understand is that what we have to do is we have to make this God's home. It's not our home. The way a person shows that a home is his, right? You put on the fence or you put on the doorpost, you put your name. What name do we put? Shin Daled Yud. Shakan. We put God's name. We put the idea of mezuzah is that you're putting God's name on the doorpost because you're showing that whose home is this? This home belongs to Hashem. That's what you're doing when you make a mezuzah. That's what we're doing. That's something that's very hard for a Gentile to appreciate. They don't come from that world. I mean, God's going to tell me what to do. No, that's why it's such an important mitzvah. Rus, that Naomi had to tell Rus this mitzvah because that's important to run. You're changing your whole life view. It's not your home anymore. This is God's home. That's the idea of what we're doing with the mezuzah. We're making it God's home. Therefore, the actual post is the object of the mitzvah is the home. Like you name after the object of the mitzvah. It's the lulav, it's the tefillin, it's the esrog. Here it is the post. The post is becoming, it's God's name on it, transfers it into the object of the mitzvah. The home is becoming the mitzvah. Therefore, the actual post is what the object of the mitzvah is. We call it by the post. That's why it's referred to as the mitzvah. But I want to say more than that. As we said, that it's a fusion. We're becoming one with God, man, woman, and God. It's one entity. So it's God's home, but we're saying means it's not just our home. We're making it God's home. God does the same thing. The idea of building a Mishkan, the idea of building a Beis HaMikdash, is God is saying is that I don't want this just to be my home. What I want this is to be your home. The idea is that the Beis HaMikdash should be, the shul should be we should feel that it's our home. It's our home. Right? That's the idea. So God says, you make your home my home, I'm making my home your home. Why? Because it's one entity. It's one entity means it's true. It's in all our names. It's written in all our names. It's just it's much more difficult for us to understand because usually that's God's home. That's the way it is in the world today, right? In most religions, you're religious for one day a week. On Sunday you go to church, that's it. Outside church you do what you want, then you come back again and you ask Hail Marys. And that's the system. We don't understand that it doesn't work that way, right? God said, I don't want you to make this my home. This has to be your home. What does it mean it has to be your home? The Ramban says in the beginning of Vayikra is we're supposed to take the messages from the Mishkan or from the Beis HaMikdash. Ultimately, that's just the prototype. We're supposed to take those messages and bring them into our house. The Shulchan is like the Mizbeach. Where you eat should be like the Mizbeach. The messages of the Beis HaMikdash, that's what you have to turn your house into. Your house has to become a mini sanctuary. Right? So the way we do it is, we make it God's home. That's how we do it. We're taking the messages from the Beis HaMikdash and make God shows us that He wants us to do it because God is telling us, this is not just my home, this is your home too. Right? So He makes His home into our home, and we take those messages and we make our home into His home. That is the balance between the two ideas. Now,
that's why one is knocking.
What's that?
That's why one, the Kohanim, is knocking on the door.
No, so now we can understand. Rav Yochanan makes a lot of sense. Rav Yochanan says the fact that you need bells to go and knock on the door in the Beis HaMikdash, right? So therefore, I understand in my own home I have to knock. So you can say it either way it works. Because that's God's home, and therefore our home is God's home too. I have to do it. Or you want to say it the other way is because that's really our home. So just as that which is our home, I have to do in my own home too. But either way, it's not a contradiction. We said that's God's home, this is our home. No, it's the same home. So whatever the message over there is the message you have to bring into your own house. That's what Rabbi Yochanan is saying. There's no contradiction. The last piece of this, right, is that why does it say give, yitnu? Why does it say take? It doesn't say give. Very simple. Because giving means I'm giving you something and it's no longer mine. That's not what's happening over here. God is telling you, I don't want you to build something only for me. What you're building is not for me. What you're doing is really you're building it for yourselves. So if you're building it for yourself, then you're not actually giving it. You're taking it for yourself. Take it for yourself. I want you to build this. This is not just for me. You're building a home for yourself. That's the place where we reside together. It's this fusion. The fusion is that, you don't say, okay, fine. You get the groceries. So I'm buying the groceries for my wife. Am I buying the groceries for my wife? I'm not buying the groceries for my wife. Right? Yes, because she asked me to go get the groceries, but I'm not buying them for her. I'm taking them for myself too. So that's not vayikhu, that's not giving, that's taking. That's why it instructs us to build a Mishkan, is take it, don't give it. You're not dead. So this idea is, again, with just a couple of very important yasodas. Number one is, marriage is a fusion, but that fusion works with the glue. It's God is part of that. God is part of that relationship. And then the home that we build. We're building the home. You're not building our home. We view it as we're building God's home. That's how bracha comes into the house. And he says to me, you're going to build a Beis Hamikdash, you're going to build a Mishkan. You're not building my home. You're building something that's going to be for you as well. Because that's the idea. It's in all our names. And now we understand, this is the cornerstone of the Jewish home. That has to be in the formation of the nation. We're talking about how to start a nation, to build a nation. You started, it's not waiting, how to serve Hashem later on. This is part and parcel of our formation, our development of making us into a nation. The building of our home is critical. It's not God's. We're saying it's God's home. I should be in the laws of the Korbanot. No. He's not instructing. He's telling you what to do for yourself. This is the message of your own home. Your own homes are going to be the same way as my Beis Hamikdash. You're going to have little mishkans, your own homes, your own tents are going to be little mishkans. That has to be in part of the beginning of the nation. That's going to be right from the beginning. That's where it has to be, because that's too important a message to wait. We'll wait to learn about the korbanot. No, come later. This has to be right now. This is in the formation of the nation. That's what it's. Everyone have a great day.